Do you feel like the medical professionals is just it's a problem of ignorance, or is it really malevolent intent from higher up corporations that, I mean, obviously profit from the ongoing cycles of not creating cures but keeping customers?
Well, it is true that pharmaceutical companies want to create products that people will have to take for a long time. So they're not particularly interested in cures, but they don't even have that vision. But what makes the medical, and there's lots of examples of chicanery in the pharmaceutical industry where drugs are promoted as much more effective than they really are, or the side effects that are known are kind of denied or diminished. So they're not above as any profit making entity. Their bottom line is profit. Ethics is not high on the list. They're not unique in that. Airline industry, the automaking industry, the fossil fuel industry, the food industry,
Yeah.
the entertainment industry. Ethics isn't, corporate ethics is kind of like a oxymoron, like, like military intelligence, like
Yeah.
the two don't go together.
Like you say in the book, you're not. It's not like they're trying to kill people. They're just trying to make money, and if they kill people, it's just like a
Yeah, they're not
byproduct.
trying to kill you. They just don't care if you die. Like they'll sell you junk foods knowing how harmful they are.
Yeah.
They're not trying to kill you. They're just trying to make money. But they don't care if you die. They don't care. Now, but what makes a medical profession so susceptible to that kind of pressure? That's not the fault of the pharmaceutical companies. That has to do with both the ignorance and the arrogance of the medical profession. The ignorance comes in not looking at the science that I've been referring to, not looking at the studies linking multiple sclerosis and stress and trauma, plenty of them, not looking at the physiology of how trauma inflames the nervous system, not looking at the physiology of how people traumatized in childhood carry higher markers, inflammatory chemicals in their bloodstream. It's all there. Not looking at how trauma and stress in childhood affects the functioning of one's chromosomes. I mean, the science is there. So there's a kind of ignorance there.
Hmm.
The arrogance is in assuming that doctors don't think they know everything, but the arrogance comes into thinking that what they don't know is not worth knowing. So, wisdom of indigenous people, for example, which has shown the mind body unity forever, not shown it, recognized it. Modern science has shown it. Indigenous wisdom has always maintained it. So, what I'm saying to you about the biopsychosocial nature of human beings and illness, that's not news to any indigenous healer. Arrogance is in dismissing the wisdom of other peoples and of human tradition. I mean, our science is amazing. Nobody can deny its achievements. Um, Nobody can. I mean, it's miraculous what modern medicine can do. It's also very limited, and the arrogance is in not recognizing the limitations.
Mm. The degree in which we experience joy and suffering in our life oftentimes comes in, like, depending upon the constitution of our personality. You said that if a parent doesn't know how to hold a child will develop a mind to hold itself, right?
Yeah, that came from a therapist.
Great.
Yeah,
Um, and so the minds that we develop to hold ourselves
yeah,
become the colored tinted glasses in which we view the world. And like we spoke to earlier with the reference to the medical industry, it's like if we see a problem or we see a leaf on a tree that has turned brown or fruit that isn't, it's like the solution oftentimes is to paint over
mm,
the
mm,
fruit with the color red paint
mm,
instead of treating the root and giving the nutrients to the soil. Likewise, as an individual within our own nature, if we have come to this withered, crippled place within our own psyche, because of the personality that we've developed, I just would love for you to share how we can, one, gain awareness on what the personality is, and then how inextricably connected it is to the amount of suffering and joy that we have.
yeah. So we talk about, for example, a winning personality. What is the personality winning? It's winning approval and admiration of others. Why does somebody have to win that? Why is somebody compelled to win that? because they didn't have it. They didn't have the acceptance and the admiration just for who they are in their early childhood. So they develop this winning personality until they get depressed because they weren't being their true self. We get people who are very nice, very nice. I worry about the very nice people because that niceness is very often a personality trait in which they actually repress their healthy aggression, their healthy capacity to set boundaries and to express healthy anger when somebody's transgressing, and they take on the needs of others. So that everybody thinks that they're so nice. And when they go to their funeral, how nice they were. And that niceness is what killed them, because that niceness reflected a repression of their healthy anger, you know. So the personality is not who we are. And the problem is, and this is, of course, a spiritual teaching that goes way back to ancient India, at least, that the personality that we develop is not actually the essential ourselves. So modern psychology has beautifully studied and depicted how the personality develops. And the personality develops in interaction with the environment. And basically, kids will develop traits that will help them fit in with the environment. If the environment doesn't accept them for who they actually are, then we develop these personality traits that are designed to make us acceptable. So I'll be charming, I'll be winning personality, I'll be very nice, or I'll be very consumed by being attractive so I can attract attention. To me, this very sad phenomena of people as they age, desperately trying to look younger because they're so identified with their attractiveness. Who am I if I'm not being attractive? But that's a function of their childhood programming reinforced by cultural conditioning. So you have the multi-billion-dollar cosmetic surgery industry. Article in Time magazine today about science is discovering the ways to reverse aging. We just can't accept the reality that we get old. You know what? It's all going to lead nowhere because there's such a thing as nature. You know, and the wisdom isn't how to get around nature, is how to align with it. You know, but we don't, in this society, it doesn't get that at all. There's a way of getting old, aging physically, without aging in our essential self and in our minds. You know, so that you can be a very youthful 90-year-old, or you can be a very old 45-year-old. You know, and it's all has to do with internal dynamics. So I'm not even sure what question I'm answering anymore. I'm sure it's a good answer, but I don't know to what.
It was a great answer. And I think it's just important to interlay how the personalities we develop then
Right.
become deleterious, obviously, within our experience in ways we're not aware of, that lead to addictions that we can't seem to resolve, right? And you said, don't ask why the addiction, why the pain.
Yeah.
The pains that we hold oftentimes were the origins of the personality being developed in the first place, that persona that we develop, which is a mask.
Yeah.
That is the barrier between us and the wound. So like serves as the protection mechanism as it did earlier in our childhood, but then it also becomes the barrier to joy as we age.
Absolutely. And you said it very succinctly. Well, to give you a personal example. So as a physician, I was a workaholic doctor. Now, I genuinely wanted to serve people. So wanting to serve humanity wasn't any kind of a false personality trait. It was genuinely expressive of who I am, as of many of my colleagues. But it doesn't operate on its own. It operates in a context, in conjunction with other dynamics that are not so pure. So one dynamic that certainly I could own to is I really believe that if I go to medical school, I'll have respect. Finally, they'll respect me. Well, why do they even need that? Because I didn't respect myself. So I had to have a stethoscope and the white coat. Now I'm somebody. So there's that. Not so healthy. But even more subtle is the need to be needed, the need to be wanted. an infant, for reasons I won't go into now, but it's explained in the book, I got the message as an infant that I wasn't wanted. That's how I interpreted the world's actions. I wasn't wanted. Now, if you're not wanted, medical school is a great way to make yourself wanted, because you're offering something very important to people, and when they're in crisis, they want you all the time. Very addictive, because there's a hole inside you where you should be, and you're trying to fill it all the time from what you get from the outside. So it's never enough. So the more you get, the more you want. That's the nature of any addiction. So therefore, I'm addicted to working. Well, that kills joy. It also makes me absent as a parent to my children, and makes me absent as a partner in my marriage, which also is not a joy enhancer. Exactly, you know. And so this trait of working hard for others, and the world admires it. And the more workaholic a physician I am, the more the world thinks I'm wonderful, and the more money I make. So I get all this reinforcement for my disconnection from myself. And then you couple that with the fact that I really wanted to help people. It gets so confusing. And the thing is to separate what's genuine in that, which is the desire to be of service and to engage in meaningful activity, and to separate that from the need to fill a hole in myself. This is hard work.
Yeah.
And in society, again, it seduces us into that disconnection and even rewards it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like we spoke to earlier. In the book, you share comedian Daryl Hammond said to you that cutting himself afforded him a crisis that's more manageable than the terror inside of you.
Yeah.
The one that's ongoing in your head.
Yeah. Now, Hammond is an interesting example. There's a documentary about him called Cracked Up, which is on Netflix. And then I spoke to him after the documentary, and he had decades of mental illness, so-called, multiple medications and diagnoses of about 30 or 40 psychiatrists. They all try to figure out what's wrong with his brain, give him the right medication, until a psychiatrist finally said to him, I don't want to call what you've got an illness. You've been abused. And he was in childhood. That's what the documentary is about. And so the self-cutting is was one manifestation of his so-called mental illness.
Yeah.
And anybody who cuts themselves, when I speak with them, my question is not always what's wrong with this behavior, but what's right about it. What's it doing for you? Now, anybody who self-cuts, and I give several examples, Daryl being one of them, is that cutting serves a purpose. First of all, it gives them a pain they can identify, as opposed to this searing emotional pain that's just so confusing and so threatening. It gives Daryl a crisis he can handle. Now he has to run around finding bandages and dealing with the cut, as opposed to the chaos in his head, the crisis that he can't handle. Self-cutting also releases the body's own painkillers, the endorphins. So temporarily, actually might even feel better.
Like numb it a little bit.
Yeah. So the point of the Daryl Hammond incident or episode is to show that these mental health, these so-called mentally ill behaviors, they all serve a function. And that function has to do with dealing with the trauma that has not been addressed. And Hammond is a very forthright, self-disclosing example of that. So there he is on the one hand. He appears on Saturday Night Live more than anybody else. And he's a brilliant comedian, getting all these accolades and making a lot of money. And just tormented inside. Until finally says to him, there's a reason for that torment. You're not crazy.
Yeah, so beautifully put. I think, you shared as well, like it's never the thing, right? It's not the heroin, it's not the whiskey, it's not the social media. It's always our relationship to it.
That's right.
Because somebody could have a completely healthy relationship with a plant medicine, with their phone. So it's always a relationship to it. And so how do you...
Or even a glass of wine.
Right.
Or, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what is the distinction there in somebody that has a healthy relationship versus not, and how does that manifest in our life?
In a healthy relationship with any behavior, whether it's to do with say a glass of wine, or your work, or your sexuality, or your relationship, or how you relate to food. Clearly, we can have a healthy relationship with food. In fact, we have to. But we can also have a dysfunctional relationship to food that could threaten our health. The key question is, are we aware? Are we conscious? Are we making deliberate choices? Or are we driven by unconscious pain? And so the unhealthy relationship is always driven by unconscious pain. So if I get into a relationship because I'm looking for a life partner with whom I can grow and whom I can cherish and feel cherished by, even if it takes several relationships to get there, that's just healthy human behavior. If I'm engaging in relationships because I need validation and I need somebody to prove to me that I'm lovable, or because I need to dominate somebody, or perhaps get some comfort in feeling dominated, so I'm driven to do it, then it's unhealthy. Same with food.
Yeah.
If I'm eating to enjoy it consciously and to nourish my body, that's great. But if I'm doing it to soothe my pain, and if I'm eating junk food to release the endorphins in my brain so I can temporarily feel better, if I'm using it to stuff down my pain, literally you're stuffing down your pain by stuffing down the food, if that's why I'm doing it, it's unhealthy. So it's not the activity per se, it's one's internal relationship to it that defines whether it's healthy or addictive. And the key question is, are you craving it? Does it give you temporary pleasure but cause harm in the long term? If yes, it's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah. It's almost just like if we going into a behavior, whatever it is that could be addictive or non-addictive based on our relationship to it, is if we're going in it from the experience of joy rather than the seeking of joy, and the temporary relief from the self, which is necessary in the addictive behavior, right? There's like, Jung has that saying that pleasure is tension reduction. And I think that's just very apt there, because it's these external addictions, or whether it's more visceral, like, self-harm, or a relationship that we have to a drug, or, pornography, or whatever it might be, it's giving us temporary relief from the pain that we can't seem to bear.
Yeah. Well, and that's my definition of addiction, is any behavior that gives us temporary pleasure or relief, and therefore we crave it, but then it creates harm in the long term and we can't give it up. That's what an addiction is. So that could be anything. Gambling, sports, eating, shopping, work, relationships, pornography, food, internet, of course, anything.
Yeah.
Anything. Or we could do any of those things. Well, not pornography, but we could do more. We could be interested in sexuality without it being unhealthy, without that being in any way unhealthy. In fact, it being a very healthy expression of who we are. It all has to do with our relationship to it.
Yeah. It just feels like the relationship to how we relate to just about everything in our reality is like the most important to pay attention and gain awareness on, because that's how we relate. That's how we commune with the world around us, is in the relation that we have to it. What is your distinction between like the Buddhist view of non-attachment, but then also expressing our emotions in a healthy way, so we can see the illusory nature of whatever is happening? We can see the content of our experience in a larger context of awareness, yet we do have the very real experience of being a human with our shit. And so how has it been, either for you on your journey, and how you support people to be non-attached, but then also be very authentic to your real-time experience?
The word attachment, it's interesting because it's got two uses. When the Buddha talked about attachment, he talked about an unhealthy craving and holding on to mind patterns or behaviors or objects or anything. So we're too attached. So letting go of attachment, non-attachment is kind of a Buddhist ideal, is that we don't look to the outside to fulfill us. That's really what non-attachment is about, I mean, it's one thing for me to want my book to do well. It's another thing for me to be attached to the book doing well, so that how the book is doing then determines how I'm doing.
Yeah.
Not a healthy attachment,
Right.
you know. But then we use the word attachment in modern psychology in a totally different way.
Yeah.
Where attachment actually is this relationship between parent and child,
Yeah.
connection, and it's essential.
Yeah.
So all mammals are creatures of attachment. No mammal would survive without attachment relationship with the nurturing environment,
Yeah.
where the attachment is a drive that pulls the parent towards the child and the child towards the parent, or the drive that pulls two adults together, like it's a gravitational force that pulls two bodies together in order to procreate children, you know, or to live in community, you know. So attachment in that sense is a healthy human drive. Here's the kicker. Those people that don't get their healthy attachment needs met in childhood will become attached in the Buddhist sense to externals
Mm.
because they haven't got the internal fulfillment and connection to themselves. Now they have to get it from the outside. So the lack of attachment in the healthy sense leads to that attachment in the unhealthy sense.
Mm. That's a very powerful distinction, because we're going to create all these coping mechanisms and behavioral compensations if we don't get our basic fundamental needs yet, which we spoke to in the previous live podcast. So in the pursuit of expressing our emotions in a healthy way, what is a healthy expression of our emotions if we're not to suppress it or repress it or express it in a way that is dangerous or harmful to those around us? How do we release what is inside of us? And somebody you quoted in the book, what's in must out.
Yeah. Well, what is in us must out. In this case, the physician researcher who said that was talking about our creative urges. You know, if something is inside us, we have to give it expression. Right. Otherwise, we'll choke. He said, you know. So, but
I'd love to go there as well. But yeah, then also there's these emotions too.
Well, so one of the essential needs of children, one of the essential developmental needs of children, in the absence of which child development is distorted, is the freedom to express all their emotions. Now, in our brains, there are certain emotional circuits. We're wired for them. They include anger, lust, curiosity, playfulness, caring for others, fear, grief, even panic. We're wired for these. We share these circuits, by the way, with other mammals. The child, in the course of their development, will experience all of them. They have to be able to express it and to have that expression received, understood, attuned with, and held by the adult world. When that doesn't happen, we start stuffing our emotions. We start disconnecting from ourselves in order to belong, in order to be accepted, to be acceptable. So then we don't know how to express healthy anger anymore. Healthy anger, there's nothing negative about it. Healthy anger simply says, you're in my space, get out. All animals have it. You know, you enter an animal space, you get an anger display.
Yeah.
You know, which is good because it prevents violence. So at least it reduces the chances of it. It's a boundary defense. That's all it is. You're in my space, get out. Yeah. Whether that's physically or emotionally true. No. Healthy anger is simply a no, which at the same time is a saying yes to yourself. When people are not granted the experience of going through healthy anger, having that understood and respected by adults, they suppress it. Now it'll burst out of them in a volcano. Either they totally repress it, in which case they become sitting ducks for malignancy or autoimmune disease, because those are the studied traits of people who develop these conditions. I don't make this stuff up. I've seen it, but I don't make it up. Or they get into states of explosive anger, which is like a volcano where the pressure's been building and building and building, and poof, all of a sudden the volcano blows its top. Yeah. And So the question, if I can translate your question, is if in childhood we were made to repress that healthy anger, how then do we learn its expression as adults?
Yes.
Well, that's a question of good therapy, I think. I think, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Would you just say like creating a nurturing environment for that to be released from within? Because in interpersonal dynamics, whether it's within our family or friends or lover, it's like these repressed emotions that we haven't dealt with are a pebble in our shoe that kind of make us shittier versions of ourselves constantly. And until we can like have, I guess, the safe space to like take off the shoe and take out the pebble,
Yeah.
which could be in through therapy or psychedelics and a lot of the modalities that
Yeah.
you suggest.
Yeah. Or even just awareness.
Yeah.
If I'm aware that anger is rising within me, well, then if I can be an observer of it and hold it myself, not that I shouldn't experience it, is that I should experience it, but I don't necessarily have to act it out on somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question of self-awareness, mindfulness, physical practices. A lot of the martial arts are not about killing others. It's about being present to yourself.
Since you brought it up, there's this beautiful part in the book where you, towards the end, page 412, you go into before the body says no, a self-inquiry exercise, right?
Yeah.
These different questions that you suggest people explore in order to gain access more and more to their true selves. And oftentimes we've created a life for ourselves by virtue of an inauthentic version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And in the pursuit of creating an authentic reality, we first have to discover who we authentically are. And so I'll share these 5 questions and then we can.
Sure. Let me just preface it by saying that this relates to a book that I mentioned in the beginning called When the Body Says No, in which I pointed out that the people who develop autoimmune disease and malignancy, as I said earlier, are people that don't know how to say no.
Yeah.
They're the very nice people who take on everybody else's stuff and they don't know how to say no to the world. The body says no for them in a form of illness. And if they can learn from that, there's a lot of healing that's possible. Now, in this chapter, we're trying to say to people, well, do you want to wait to get sick? Or do you want to learn to say no before your body has to say it for you? So that's the intent of this chapter.
Right. Which is, I think, a beautiful invitation for all the listeners. Like, it's not ideal, obviously, to wait until we have cancer to like realize we have to deal with our shit, but to allow these questions to be a process of self-inquiry. Question 1, in my life's important areas, what am I not saying no to? Question number 2, how does my inability to say no impact my life?
So let's take an example.
Yeah.
I arrive here in LA. I call you up, Andre. Do you want to go for coffee or tea, whatever? But you've been up all night helping a friend and you're tired. You don't feel like going for coffee. But you don't want to displease me. You want to be a nice guy. And you come for coffee. It's a very trivial example. Yeah. What happens to you afterwards? What do you feel afterwards? What's the impact?
I'm going to feel like I abandoned myself. And that's, I guess, maybe too much language for it. But
but you'll have some sense of self-betrayal, yeah? Physically, what's the impact? Fatigue? Tired, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So this little word no, if you don't say it, there's a lot of impact.
Yeah.
So we're inviting people in this example to, what is the impact when you don't say no? I'm talking about a no that wants to be said and you don't say it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think that's also just an important thing for the listeners, that you don't ever want somebody to be in your space out of obligation. Like, you know, I don't want somebody to come help me move because they feel like they have to, only because they genuinely want to, right?
That's
and that goes into so many different things. All right. Question number 3. What body signals have I been overlooking? What symptoms have I been ignoring that could be warning signs? Where do I pay conscious attention?
Yeah. So here's the thing. People might feel tired, or they might have difficulty sleeping, anxious, they might have dry mouth, back spasms, stomach aches, frequent colds, fatigue, of course. And they go to the doctor saying, headaches.
Yeah.
They go to the doctor, get rid of these symptoms for me. I'm suggesting, well, nobody wants to live with headaches. I understand the desire to escape them, but you might want to ask yourself, is my body talking to me?
Yeah.
Is my body saying no somewhere where I'm not? So these bodies, so do a bit of an inventory. How have I felt this week? And if there are noticeable physical signals, see them as signals. Don't just dismiss them as symptoms that you want to get rid of.
Yeah.
Maybe look into what the message is.
That's so powerful, just because oftentimes we have something that happens within ourselves and we think it's something wrong with us, but instead you're inviting to look at it as a signal, as our bodies are so intelligent.
Absolutely.
It's there for a reason. So thank you for the headache, because there's something that is going on within me that if I didn't